Hey there, Internet Drifters. It's Izanami-kun, and I'm here with character development number 3. Now, this time we're actually going to do 3 different people instead of just the one, because we started a new colony and we're going to kind of fuse it together with a story. That way we start off knowing what happened before, and hopefully that will make a more entertaining and a more rounded story going forward. So first we're going to start with Per. Per was a logical child and an archaeologist, and we kind of made a little bit of a story out of that during the episode, but not super in depth. So we'll say he's at least slightly autistic. And since he has a 0 in social, but not incapable of social, we'll say he's high functioning, maybe with, I don't know which one he'd be on the spectrum, but I'm going to assume, based on my knowledge, which isn't a whole lot, but I'm going to assume it's more of a high functioning Asperger's kind of thing, because he obviously was able to get a job and live mostly on his own. A lot of autistic kids can't, or adults even aren't really capable of doing that for various reasons. Asperger's. So now that we have that, he's also got a chemical interest, and he's too smart. The too smart has a buff debuff thing, and I don't remember what that is, but I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the whole Asperger's thing, you know. It's very analytical. He's very analytical and maybe takes things a little too literally. He's incapable of artistic, which also fits into that whole spectrum of being autistic. Not because autistic people aren't artistic, but that it's very likely that without a true connection to other people's emotions, it's difficult for him to artistically express his, which is a common autistic stereotype at the very least. So he's got all these passions and interests. He really likes shooting. He really likes construction. He kind of likes crafting, medical and intellectual. Being an archaeologist, the construction and intellectual kind of makes sense there. Shooting is the one I want to really focus on, because archaeologists tend to not be military types. They're, maybe they like guns, but they don't usually have the ability to defend themselves a lot, mostly because they're intellectual types. 6 isn't really great. I wouldn't call that expert level or pro level or anything like that, but he's proficient, which means at some point he learned to protect himself using a bow and arrow, a gun, something projectile. We will say that happened in the same event where all 3 of these people got to know each other. And the reason is because that's, kind of part of the story. It had to be a sort of oppressive regime situation that just so happened to have an archaeological site around. So okay, the crafting and medical, I assume, would have just come along the way. I mean, being on a planet where there's not a whole lot of means. It's maybe a backwater planet, maybe it's an overdeveloped planet. Either way, he obviously doesn't have a lot of money. He might not be broke or poor, but he's not in the upper echelon. So the places that he would go to for archaeological digs may not always have available stuff. So that crafting and medical could have just been him making medicine, or, you know, whatever was needed for the area. And he's kind of interested in those things. He doesn't have a lot of points in anything that he's not interested in, except for animals. And that actually feeds more into the autistic backstory, because he wouldn't see the need, he wouldn't see the point in working on things that he wasn't passionate about, or at least interested in, because it wouldn't even enter his mind as something that needed attention, unless it was a direct necessity, which is probably where he built the other skills that he does have more than 0 in. And cooking is not one of his things. So obviously other people have always cooked for him. Or, you know, he's had a nutrient paste machine at his disposal and probably doesn't care much about it. He's a fast walker and he's too smart, and I don't know what to say about him other than he is sort of the rock of the location of the story that we're building here, because he is the easiest one to really figure out. Purr's motives are pure, let's say that. So we could almost call him Pure instead of Purr. So then there's Severin. And Severin was a trader's child and a space humanitarian. So he had connections to maybe a middle class sort of marketing scheme. And not scheme, but, you know, the different interactions that a trader makes with other traders. I mean, he got to know that a little bit when he was a kid. And as he grew up, he renounced, well, it doesn't even say that he really renounced their business, but he's obviously not doing the trading. I mean, he has barely anything in social, so he wouldn't be a very good trader. He's got an interest in it, but that's not what he is focused on. So obviously he has skated by with what little social skills he had. He has, on the other hand, gotten a lot of experience cooking. And I'm going to say, because he went into space humanitarianism, I'm going to say his cooking came from soup kitchens, trying to feed the poor in space. So people that either are on, you know, overdeveloped worlds that the company factions aren't taking care of, or on brand new untouched planets that are, you know, settlers from other worlds, but they're not quite established enough to have the means to support themselves. Severin had a bleeding heart for those people. So the place where Purr was at doing his archaeological dig, which I'm not sure why he would have been there. We'll figure that out later, but that place must have been a hot spot for poor people. And I'm going to say it couldn't have been completely overdeveloped because of the whole treasure hunter thing, which we haven't gotten to. But Hammer, since Hammer is a treasure hunter, this place would have had to have some kind of treasure. And it obviously had an archaeological site. So if it were overdeveloped, all of those places would have been raped and pillaged for what they were worth already. So this had to be a planet that had just recently been taken over and industrialized, but wasn't quite overdone yet. And there were still spaces that had things of value in them that maybe the company wanted to explore. And so maybe the company hired her to go check that out. So we'll say that. Company owning the planet hired her to Alright, so the company that owned the planet, that was industrializing the planet, hired her to determine if the local lore was correct, if there was actually something of value in some ruins. And then Severin would have gone there. Oh, why would he go to the site though? Well, he would have gone to the planet to help those in need. And maybe there were locals. There would have had to be locals to have lore. Although they're all human, so they couldn't have been created there. But maybe maybe the locals on that planet had been there for so long, maybe hundreds of years, that they developed the lore before anybody was able to tame that planet on an industrial scale. The lore would have been maybe about an area that just gave them the heebie-jeebies and had some weird shit happen there. But the locals would have been largely ignored because it would have been obviously a rim world. And maybe Severin found out about it because the industry, the company that now owns the planet, that hired her to find out about this one particular site, maybe they broadcast this as a, hey, look at what we're doing. There's these people and we're going to revolutionize this planet. And Severin wanted in on that. He wanted to help. Let's name this planet. What should we name this planet? Garaniabi. Sure. Put it over here. There we go. Now we have a name for the planet. Wanted to help. So he hasn't had a lot of chances to help out in ways that have to do with animals. So that passion must have developed pretty recently, wherever he had come from. But he obviously is the kind of person, Severin is, that farms the food to then make the best possible meals out of it to give to people, to help. And that is the majority of what he wants to do with his life, because it's also the majority of his passions and his points. But he's got a lot of other points just kind of randomly spread out everywhere. I assume in tasks that he's either been forced to do by necessity or out of boredom, maybe. That melee, that little bit of interest in melee, I'm going to say that probably was more sport than it was serious. He doesn't strike me as the kind of person that is really able to defend himself. I mean, maybe there was some necessity, But for the most part, I just see him more as a, hey, let's do some arm wrestling kind of things. He's an ascetic. Still don't know how to pronounce that word. And that really feeds into the humanitarian concept, is that he doesn't want to have a whole lot. He came from a family that was very interested in money and doesn't want to be like that. He's seen what that does to people. Let's tackle this chemical interest thing before we move on. So with Per, I would say the chemical interest is how it helps connect people. Which means he wouldn't be technically interested in all chemicals, because some chemicals isolate and some chemicals bond. For instance, alcohol and marijuana, or in the game smoke leaf. They are connective. They bring people together. When two people enjoy that same chemical, they can understand each other better through the vehicle of that chemical. And that is a very autistic perspective of chemicals themselves. I think Severin, on the other hand, would probably be more interested in the isolation of those chemicals and not so much the connective properties, although it would still happen. And that might have been what happened to connect Per and Severin, was maybe there was some local, like peyote or something. And Severin, I think, is looking for enlightenment. And maybe he wanted to try it. Maybe Severin wanted to try it, and he was there just helping to feed people around the same place as this archaeological site. And Per was like, hey, can I do it with you? And they bonded through that experience, I think. All right, so we got that, and now there's hammer time. That was bad. Okay, Hammer is the one that most cares about the glitter and the glamour, or at least he did. He's 82 now, so one would think that in his youth he was very about the bling. But since he got stabbed in the back, I mean, possibly literally, he has a bad back, so, and a stab scar in his torso. So I think maybe he, in his age, has started to become wiser about material possessions, and he still wants the thrill of the chase, but it's not about the glamour anymore. It's not about getting the money for it. It's about that feeling of hope, of hearing about this lore that says some shiny ball in the desert is going to revolutionize the planet. It is the tear of God or something. And actually, we'll go with that, tear of God. shiny ball in the desert. And it's just hearing about that treasure and thinking, I want to see it for myself. I want to experience searching for that. I want to know how much people from the past valued this item so much that they constructed traps and tombs to protect this sacred treasure. And I want to know more. And it's almost on the same level as Purr's desire to understand the logic of archaeological digs. But Hammer also has that kindness, and that makes him want to help people. He wants to look past the ugliness and beauty of people to just see who they are now. Because obviously the people that he had before were not so great people inside. They were hungry for money, and they stabbed him in the back for it. Now obviously, because Hammer can't do hauling, cleaning, he can't work with animals, which I don't know how he got a 1 in that, but obviously that must have changed after he got that skill. And he can't do anything artistic. I assume he's probably more of a man's man that just is not capable of expressing himself. And maybe by this point, 82 years old, he doesn't really want to learn. But this is the reason why Hammer can trust Severin and Purr, because Purr is too honest and too logical to stab somebody in the back. And Severin cares too much about people and helping others. And both of them, Purr and Severin, really don't care about money. They care about doing what they want to do with their lives. They have different purposes, different goals for life, but neither one of them really care about the money or the fame or any of that. They just want happy lives, happy, fulfilling lives. And that would have brought Hammer into the whole thing. I think Hammer would have been looking for this shiny ball, tear of God in the desert. And he would have gone all by himself because he wouldn't have been able to trust anybody. And the shiny ball in the desert was probably guarded by a city. And that would have been what brought Purr to it, was wanting to learn more about this city, wanting to learn more about who these people were. And maybe in doing his archaeological dig stuff, he found people. He found crypto caskets. Whoops, that was not supposed to go there. So Purr would have gone, maybe not by himself, but with, some guards or something. Maybe he would have gone by himself. And he found real people still alive in the chambers. And Severin would have gone because of an ad about... Oops. So he would have seen the ad about the sleeping people of Halia. And then those people would have said, there is a ball in the desert nearby this city of Halia, which we are protecting. We are the guardians of the tear of God. And maybe that tear of God was just a really weirdly translated AI core or a healer mech serum. Something maybe that isn't actually a treasure, but to them it was. You know, when you first start up a game of RimWorld, if you end up getting healer mech serum, you treasure that. You put that in a place that hopefully will never get stolen from, and then you try to survive without it to the best of your ability. What if this village of people, this city of Halia, what if they had built a great civilization and they had one healer mech serum among the whole of them, and they did the best they could and had that healer mech serum from nearly the beginning, and they did the best they could and they hid it, saying, we need this for absolute emergencies. And then they ended up with the plague. Perhaps the richest ones or the most respected ones were able to get into a cryostasis chamber, but the rest of them didn't survive. Because maybe they had a lot of people, but they didn't have a lot of technology. The cryostasis chambers may have been crash landed with their ship. Maybe they only had a couple, you know? And they would have said, yes, there is a treasure. Yes, it's in the desert. You will have to find it. We will give it to you if you help us. We will not stop you from getting it, at the very least. And that's where Hammer comes in. Because he would have heard through a black market source that this was going on. And he would have heard from the back alleys and the back channels of the universe that there was a treasure. And in that moment, he would have lit up. His life would have had purpose again. And then he gets there and finds out it's a healer mech serum. Or to be non-Rimworldian, you can call it something else. Or there. Restorative gel. Which goes along with the Tear of God story a little bit better than healer mech serum anyway. He would have found out, oh, it's just a restorative gel. It's not worth any money. But this was fun. This was what I missed. This was the experience that I was looking for. And both of, Per and Severin would be like, yeah, we don't really care about it anyway. Like, you can keep it if you want to. And maybe he had more health problems. And he was like, fuck it, I'm just going to use it on myself. Maybe he had a heart problem that he used the restorative gel to cure. And then after that came out, the company was no longer interested in the city of Halia. And with Severin's contacts and his skills, he was able to find people. No, actually, it would have been Hammer, I think. Hammer, with his social skills and his connections, would have found places for those people, the few survivors of Halia, where they could have gone. And then they were all sort of just sitting around last day before being picked up, before the people of Halia were picked up too. And the people of Halia were like, we're going on a big adventure. This is what our people do. And they got out some peyote or something similar. And we're like, we're going to go on a vision quest. Because this is what our people do before a big adventure, before we take this big step into a new chapter. And maybe all three of them did the peyote together. And Hammer really only did it because why not? You know, he's 82. He's like, well, I've had a good life. I might as well. Because he's an adventurous person, obviously. And he's obviously also very social. And then, so I think that would have been the one moment that bound them all together. Because while they had this vision quest experience, I think they all bonded together. And they saw through the eyes of the universe and how together, with all of their skills, they could transform a planet. They could go to a rim world, save some locals, become a civilization, create their own treasure, and just be and become what future archaeologists get to study. I think in that moment, that was when they decided, this is where we're going together. Let's do this. And so they got on a spaceship, got in their cryostasis chambers, their crypto sleep chambers, whatever the fuck you want to call them. And they were like, let's do this thing. And they set off. The ship automatically programmed to do what it does, to just fly through space and take them somewhere. Maybe it was designed for the ship to explode when it found the right kind of planet. One that had people and had some development, but wasn't a developed place, wasn't in the clutches of industry, wasn't claimed just yet. Programmed ship to activate destruction sequence awakening pods. And now we're caught up. Now we have caught up to where the story begins. A new chapter of all of their lives. Hammer very, very near the end of his life at 82 years old. But that man, he could live another 10, 20 years for all we know. Severin and Per are very much already well into their lives. This may be the last chapter of theirs too, but they're all gonna go for it. Because that's what driven people do. And that is what happens after a vision quest. I would assume. I don't know. I've never had one, but it does seem to fit. I think we're going to stop there. Like if you liked this video. Subscribe if you haven't already. We will continue this series mostly through Let's Plays. And we'll try to figure out what we're going to do next Wednesday, because I did all 3 in one go today. Check me out on Patreon. I still got some stuff I'm going to include there that's just for patrons only. Most of it's upcoming, but you know, there's still some stuff that's in there right now that you can enjoy that's Patreon only. And I will see you guys in the next video.